In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, October 26th, here in South Korea. President Yoon Suk Yeol ends his Middle East diplomatic agenda in Qatar with an agreement to enhance bilateral ties into a comprehensive strategic partnership and an invitation to Korea for his Qatari counterpart. Also, in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu makes public his intentions to launch a ground operation into Gaza against Palestinian militants as leaders at the U.S Security Council failed to reach a consensus regarding the latest conflict between Israel and Hamas. Meanwhile, Korea's economy expands 0.6% in the third quarter on quarter amid a rebound in exports, but pundits remain uncertain about prospects for the year amid lingering external risk factors. President Yoon Suk Yeol landed home earlier on this Thursday morning, having ended his Middle East agenda in Qatar, where he agreed to promote bilateral ties into a comprehensive strategic partnership as Korea and Qatar look to celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations next year. Our presidential correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korea and Qatar have elevated their bilateral relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership as President Yoon Suk Yeol on Wednesday held a summit with the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. The event comes as Yoon is on a state visit to Qatar, and next year will be the 50th year since the two nations' diplomatic ties were first established.
The two leaders have agreed to strengthen diplomatic and security communication channels and to further expand defense and defense industry cooperation based on the newly signed MOU on arms cooperation.
In addition, the two leaders have agreed to expand bilateral cooperation in the LNG sector to encompass the entire upstream and downstream sectors, including LNG carrier construction, operation, and maintenance. This comes as Qatar Energy signed deals worth $3.9 billion with South Korean shipmaker HD Hyundai Heavy for 17 LNG carriers. And the two saw the need to look for more areas of cooperation.
Furthermore, both leaders acknowledge the need to expand substantive cooperation in various fields such as infrastructure, investment, agriculture, shipping, culture, people-to-people exchanges, and healthcare.
They show support for each other in terms of their regional security issues as the Israel-Hamas war continues and the Korean Peninsula sees provocations from North Korea.
President Yoon expresses hope that Qatar, acting as a mediator in the region, can contribute to easing tensions through communication with relevant parties. South Korea will also play a necessary role and make contributions.
In response, the Qatari leader showed his support for South Korea's policies towards North Korea. The two then moved on to the official MOU signing ceremony where they signed 5 MOUs. They include cooperation in smart farm production, advanced technologies, and deepening exchanges among small to medium-sized enterprises. After the ceremony, the two wrapped up the summit with lunch at the palace. According to the top office, during the meal, President Yoon invited the Emir of Qatar for a state visit to South Korea next year, to which the Qatari leader accepted. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also in Qatar, the president attended a business forum to further support joint economic ventures between the two countries. Our Moon Hye-ryun has details.
As part of the final leg of his trip to Qatar, President Yoon Suk Yeol ramped up efforts to further economic ties through a business forum resulting in 10 signed MOUs across numerous sectors. On Wednesday local time in Doha, he met with 250 business leaders and spoke of the progress made between the two countries leading up to the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations next year. He pointed out that Qatar and South Korea have contributed to each other's economic development through energy supplies from the former and infrastructure construction from the latter. The memorandums of understanding signed at this forum spanned across more than just energy and construction, extending to new businesses such as cosmetics and autonomous vehicles, signaling a future with greater cooperation between the two countries.
앞으로 AI를 한국과 카타르의 중점 협력 과제로 설정하여 민간 차원의 파트너십을 지원하는 한편 AI 디지털 규범에 대한 국제 논의를 우리 양국이 함께 주도해 나가야 합니다.
With the two MOUs signed during the bilateral summit between the South Korean leader and his Qatari counterpart, this brings the total to 12 MOUs with Doha worth over $4.6 billion. President Yoon wrapped up his tour of the Middle East with a total of 63 MOUs signed worth $20.2 billion. Throughout the year, South Korea has hit what's being called a second boom in the Middle East, with $29 billion MOU deals with Saudi Arabia at the end of last year, and a $30 billion investment from the United Arab Emirates earlier this year.
A playing field the size of $79.2 billion has been created for our companies wanting to venture out into the big three Middle Eastern countries.
Another key takeaway from this trip was the deal cut with Saudi Arabia to build a crude oil reserve of 5.3 million barrels in the South Korean city of Ulsan by 2028. This comes as oil prices continue to fluctuate, with conflict between Israel and Hamas spiking concern over oil supplies. 문혜련, Arirang News.
And Israel has shared intentions to launch a massive ground mission into Gaza as global leaders at the UN Security Council failed to reach a consensus on a resolution to better protect civilians from the conflict between Israeli forces and Palestinian militants. Our Seokjojeon has the latest.
In a televised statement on Wednesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that his military is preparing a ground invasion of Gaza, but did not elaborate on the timing or any other information about the operation.
We are raining hellfire on Hamas. We have already killed thousands of terrorists, and this is only the beginning. Simultaneously, we are preparing for a ground invasion. I will not elaborate on when, how, or how many. I will also not elaborate on the various calculations we are making, which the public is mostly unaware of, and that is how things should be.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden said he did not demand that Israel hold off on a ground invasion into Gaza until Hamas releases hostages. Speaking at a press conference at the White House on Wednesday, Biden said that he's only indicated that if it's possible to get the hostages out, Israel should do so, but added that it's Netanyahu's decision. Biden's remarks come amid reports of the Biden administration encouraging the delay of a ground invasion in the hopes more hostages could be freed and humanitarian assistance could reach Gaza. And Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani said Wednesday that his country is continuously seeking to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. The Prime Minister was also hopeful that a breakthrough in talks would happen, but warned that an Israeli ground assault would make freeing hostages much more difficult. Over in New York, both a U.S.-led and Russian-led resolution on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East failed to pass at the UN Security Council. The Council first voted for the U.S.-led draft resolution, which called for humanitarian pauses in Gaza, condemned the October 7th attack by Hamas in Israel, and called for the immediate and unconditional release of all remaining hostages held by the militant group. It was vetoed by Russia, China, and the UAE. Russia's draft resolution, which called for a humanitarian ceasefire, was also voted down, only receiving 4 votes in favor, 2 votes against, and 9 abstentions. This comes as 2 different draft resolutions proposed by Brazil and Russia last week were also rejected. Seokjojeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Russia's military has conducted a drill simulating a nuclear strike. According to the Kremlin on Wednesday, Vladimir Putin oversaw the drill, which sought to test Russia's ability to deliver a massive retaliatory nuclear response by land, sea and air through practical launches of ballistic and cruise missiles. The drill follows Russia's upper house vote on Wednesday to de-ratify the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Now, previously, Putin had said de-ratification would mirror Washington's stance as the U.S. signed but did not ratify the nuclear test ban. Meanwhile, over in the U.S., at least 22 people have reportedly been killed in a shooting spree in the state of Maine. According to CNN, dozens of more people have been injured Wednesday evening at several locations across the city of Lewiston. Relevant authorities have taken to online platforms, including Facebook, to urge members of the public to stay indoors as the shooter remains at large. As of now, authorities have identified a man named Robert Card as a person of interest in the mass shooting. Third quarter findings show yet another slight expansion in Korea's economy amid a rebound in exports and private consumption. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin reports.
South Korea's economy recorded a slight growth during the July to September period. Data from the Bank of Korea released on Thursday shows that the country's gross domestic product, a key indicator of economic growth, rose 0.6% on quarter during the third quarter of this year. This is the third consecutive quarter that the country has seen economic growth and the second straight quarter that the nation has seen an on-quarter economic growth of 0.6%. The central bank said the growth was mainly led by the increase in net exports as well as private spending, the two main drivers of South Korea's GDP. Net exports rose in the third quarter as total exports rose more sharply compared to total imports. Exports rose by 3.5% from the previous quarter thanks to recovery in shipments of semiconductors as well as machinery and equipment. Imports were up by 2.6% on the back of increased imports of petroleum products. Private spending rose by 0.3%, mostly driven by increased spending on food and accommodation. Government spending also increased by 0.1% as spending on social security benefits went up. Investment in construction grew by 2.2% on increased orders, but investment in facilities dropped by 2.7% due to sluggish demand for machinery. Despite the rise in both net exports and private spending, it remains uncertain whether the nation can reach the BOK's economic growth outlook due to global uncertainties.
There are growing uncertainties regarding how the recent geopolitical risks arising from the Israel-Hamas conflict and the continued interest rate hikes in the United States will impact our country.
But the officials said that although the central bank previously said that South Korea's economy will have to grow around 0.7% in both the third and the fourth quarter to meet this year's outlook, this was simply a rough estimate and that it's still possible for the nation's economy to grow 1.4%. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Korea's business sentiment index for October lost ground on month, with both manufacturing and non-manufacturing firms sharing negative outlooks. According to the Bank of Korea on this Thursday, the index stands at 70 this month, which is the lowest since February, despite a rebound in September amid a tangible retreat in consumer spending. The index measures business sentiment about market prospects, with a reading below 100 meaning pessimists outnumber optimists. And SK hynix saw sales surging by 24% on quarter in the third quarter. Company officials on this Thursday linked the finding to strong sales of high bandwidth memory semiconductor amid the growing AI industry. Sales of DRAM chips were also reportedly in the black for the first time this year, as the average selling price gained 10%. Despite the surge in sales, the company logged an operating loss of some $1.3 billion in the third quarter. Paying for purchases using something other than cash is hardly new here in Korea, and as part of efforts to further facilitate this trend, related service providers are ramping up their marketing campaigns. Our An Sung-jin reports.
As a tech-savvy country, South Korea is already well on its way to a cashless society. This was possible due to mobile or other payment services where customers enter a password to make payments using bank account information previously stored on smartphones.
With the simple shake or swipe of a phone, payment has become increasingly more convenient for smartphone users.
A report released by the Bank of Korea showed that the daily usage of mobile payment services for the first half of 2023 increased by 13.4% compared to the same period last year. There are various mobile payment providers, including big fintech companies, credit card institutions, or mobile service providers, where non-traditional bank tech companies take up nearly half of the digital payment methods.
There is a lot of competition and potential for growth in this market. but in the future it could become a market where only the most convenient payment service provider dominates.
Samsung Electronics, where the user base for their mobile payment service, Samsung Pay, has been rapidly increasing, is looking to replace the physical wallet with a digital one. Credit card companies are also trying to meet the growing needs of customers.
We're focusing on our open payment strategy where we can interchangeably use other credit cards on our platform. We're increasing the number of shops that accept KB Pay through partnerships with big tech companies and franchises while also making it available overseas.
As such, these mobile payment services are now stretching beyond the borders of Korea.
For our users to experience the same convenience outside of Korea, we're focused on expanding the number of available countries on our platform, including cross-border payments where tourists in Korea could also use their own national payment platforms. Our service is available in 48 regions, and we're continuing to conduct research in order to understand user preference.
But venturing overseas brings its own challenges.
As companies target overseas markets, I think an important factor is to be able to easily resolve any disputes with overseas service providers. It's different from when a customer has issues during a domestic transaction.
How these different payment services develop is expected to further drive South Korea towards a completely cashless society. Han Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In other news, U.S. lawmakers are seeking to designate November 22nd as Kimchi Day. According to the Museum of Korean American Heritage on Wednesday, the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability will submit a resolution to this end in December. The move is being led by Korean American Republican Representative Young Kim, with support from more than a dozen lawmakers. The resolution comes as Seoul and Washington celebrate the 70th anniversary of their alliance this year, which also marks the 120th anniversary of the first Korean immigrants to arrive in the U.S. The resolution claims that kimchi has been widely acknowledged as a healthy dish with growing popularity in the U.S. as well. Here in Seoul, a seasonal tour returns to offer visitors here the chance to indulge in a serene evening glimpse of Korea's first Western-style imperial palace. My colleague Shin Se-byuk was there.
When the day fades into darkness, Seokjojeon Hall illuminates Seoul's night. Located in Deoksugung Palace in central Seoul, Seokjojeon Hall completed in 1910 as Korea's first Western-style imperial palace. As its literal name, a hall made of stone, suggests, Seokjojeon Hall is constructed entirely out of granite and bricks instead of the traditional wood and mud. On autumn nights, a unique tour of this historic building unfolds. The regular seasonal tour, dubbed Night at Seokjojeon, takes visitors on a journey back in time. Guided by hosts in traditional Joseon Dynasty attire and accompanied by insightful narrators, visitors explore 9 spaces. Stepping into Seokjojeon's central lobby, you're greeted by authentic furnishing and decor. Highlights include the Emperor's bedroom, adorned in regal yellow, and the Emperor's chamber, embellished with delicate plum blossoms. After the indoor exploration, the experience continues on an outdoor terrace, exclusively open for night tour visitors. Guests can enjoy tea and desserts beneath the soft glow of the autumn moon. Live classical music sets the mood, making the night a perfect blend of history and culture. The approximately 1-hour tour includes an original musical made specially for this night tour. The performance features historical figures, Emperor Gojong, who built Seokjojeon, and Empress Gyeongsang.
I failed to secure a spot the last few times, but I finally made it, and it was worth the wait. The guide was fantastic, and the interior was just stunning. Opening up at night also made it even more special.
From the warm welcome from those wearing traditional clothes to the regional musical, everything was enjoyable. Seokjojeon is a modern residence, but it has a lot of authentic Korean charm. It truly was a meaningful and enriching experience.
Seokjojeon at night tours run until November 2nd, but reservations are currently closed. However, the night tour may return to greet more visitors next year. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the U.S., after 3 failed attempts, Republican Mike Johnson was elected the 56th Speaker of the House of Representatives on Wednesday, bringing an end to prolonged Republican chaos on Capitol Hill. Johnson was the 4th Republican to receive the party's nomination after Tom Emmer dropped out earlier the same day. The conservative Louisiana lawmaker won 220 votes in the lower chamber of Congress. Johnson is also a close ally of former President Donald Trump. While his conservative stance on policies such as abortion and same-sex marriage has garnered criticism in the past, Johnson promised to waste no time in getting the House back in business. He also pledged support for Israel in its fight against Hamas. In southern Mexico, Category 5 Hurricane Otis made landfall just after midnight Wednesday local time, with wind speeds of up to 270 kilometers per hour. According to the U.S. National Hurricane Center, Otis touched down near the popular resort city of Acapulco. Officials warned of a life-threatening storm surge as well as destructive waves and heavy flooding in coastal areas, with the storm set to bring heavy rainfall of up to 51 centimeters to affected regions. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said no deaths had been reported, but that updates were being affected by damage to communications infrastructure. He also urged people to evacuate the area, while schools have cancelled classes in Mexico's southern state of Guerrero. San Diego SeaWorld announced on Wednesday its first birth of an emperor penguin chick in over a decade. The baby penguin hatched about 2 weeks ago on September 12th on SeaWorld's grounds. With the rise of sea levels and loss of Antarctic ice cap, the flightless bird is near threatened species. According to Justin Brackett, curator of birds at SeaWorld, emperor penguins rarely hatch in captivity and take up to 65 to 72 days to be born. This is the first such birth at the site in 13 years and will be the 17th emperor penguin at the San Diego theme park. Kimchi, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Inland areas were shrouded in a thick fog that made it look like a layer of dust covering the scenery, but dust levels are in a normal range in most places. Meanwhile, central areas are set to receive rain this afternoon, so please have an umbrella handy. Meanwhile, Gyeongsang-do provinces and their neighboring regions will have a rain-free day, basking under sunny skies. Morning commuters, make sure to layer up for Friday, because we're talking a low of 8 degrees in Seoul, which is around the norm, but that's 7 degrees Celsius lower than today's wake-up temperatures. This afternoon, we're seeing highs that are similar to yesterday's. Our tops out at 21 degrees, Daegu at 24 degrees Celsius. Looking ahead, eastern parts of the country should keep an umbrella handy for tomorrow. But here's a brighter note for those with weekend plans. The weather promises a radiant dose of sunshine nationwide. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the top stories at this hour here in Korea. In our panel session coming up next, we address flu concerns ahead of this winter. Do stay with us.